faith and those who live it. I'm your host, Renee Kranz. With me again, I have Father Tad Pacholczyk. He was here a couple months ago, and we did so good, he agreed to come back. He was like, sure, I'll come back. Father Tad, thank you for being here today.
Oh, great to be able to join you again, Renee. Thanks for having me on. I really
Yeah.
look forward to this show. It's such an interesting topic that you've picked.
Yes. So, Father Tad, I'm going to have you tell people just a little bit about yourself, but I'm going to tell them why we have you here today. So, we're going to talk a little bit about one case in particular that has come into the news around brain death and pregnancy and kind of end of life decisions and things like that. Before we came on, Father Tad informed me this is a conversation with a lot of things that are around it, especially to talk about end of life decisions. So we're going to do this episode around this piece, and then we're going to talk about some end of life decisions and directives and so on in another episode later. So, Father Tad, can you just real quickly tell people who you are?
Yeah, I serve at the National Catholic Bioethics Center, and I'm senior ethicist there. My background was in science. I have a doctorate in neuroscience, and then, of course, did work in ethics, bioethics, medical ethics, to kind of join these two fields of science and religion or values and faith. And so, I've been involved in the Bioethics Center and their work for more than 20 years
Oh,
now.
wow. Wow. So you're well versed in this stuff. So I think we have the right person here, which is great.
Oh, well, thank you. It's
Yes.
certainly great to be able to do it. I love
Yes.
this work. And I tell people no 2 days are ever the same on the job,
Oh,
you
I
know?
bet not. I bet
Yeah.
not. Okay, so what I really wanted to talk to you about today is there is an ongoing case in Georgia of a pregnant woman who has been declared brain dead, and they have been keeping her alive. I'm using kind of air quotes with that. Through artificial means in order to, because she is pregnant. And so they are keeping her alive so that her unborn child can develop far enough along to be born or taken a C-section, I assume, but so that that child can survive. There has been a lot of outcry about this from many people. The media has kind of twisted this story as far as why the hospital is doing it, because the hospital is not telling us why they're doing it really, unless something new has happened, which Father Tad will be able to tell me. So this case brings up several ethical questions around rights of the mother, rights of the child, definitions of brain death, interests of the state, and other things I believe that I'm probably not thinking of. So can you first kind of fill us in on what's going on with this case, and why there's such an outcry, all that, please?
Yeah, well, you're right. There is an outcry. I would say the pro-abortion forces seem to be particularly interested in pushing on this one. They're saying, for example, things like, well, this isn't fair because the mother is just being used as an incubator.
Mm-hmm.
And, others have said, well, it seems like because the mom is deceased, it should be possible to basically unplug her now and allow for her burial and allow for the family to grieve the situation.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see the kinds of angles that people, are sensitive to, and I think rightly so.
Right.
But the problem here, normally when you have a pregnancy, let's just sort of lay this out a little bit. You have two patients
Mm-hmm.
who are involved,
Mm-hmm.
a mom and her child. And we're in a kind of unusual, I would say even highly unusual situation here, where the mom has died. And thanks to the fact that she was on a ventilator when this occurred, she had, just to refresh our memories about what happened, she had a series of blood clots that
Mm-hmm.
went to her brain. And she was, massive stroke that just basically wiped out her brain. And so at that point, the doctors were faced with a situation. They did all the testing for brain death, concluded that she, had died. But because she was receiving oxygen through the ventilator and because they could modulate other things, they give her drugs to
Mm-hmm.
hold up her blood pressure, they could put a heating pad under her. to keep her warm if her body was starting to fail, because when you die, all kinds of things start going into dysregulation.
Right.
And so they did that, and they said, look, there's another patient here. There's a second patient, and we want to take care of it. And in some of the reports that I saw, the claim was made that in Georgia state law, that they were required to do this, that as long as there was a fetal heartbeat detected,
Mm-hmm.
that they were required to not do anything that would constitute an abortion. But they didn't say that unplugging the mom would constitute an abortion,
Right.
really. And so this was kind of grabbed by the press. And I think at one point also the child's mother or grandmother, so the mother of the lady who died, said something like, well, we should have been given an opportunity to, say something about the kind of care that we wanted our daughter to get, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think all of this has played out to the pro-abortion side
Yeah.
very strongly. And, probably it makes sense to just push back immediately on a couple of points.
Yeah.
One being the claim that a woman is an incubator in a situation like this. No, I mean, look, when you come across a woman on the street who's pregnant, you would never go up to her and say, hey, you're just an incubator.
Right.
I
Right.
mean, it's so
That'd be
kind of
ridiculous.
dehumanizing.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous,
Yeah.
dehumanizing. It's just not fair. It's not correct. It's not true. And in this case, we can't do that for the mom either. She is a mom still, a mom who has died, but whose body is still able to provide some support and benefit to her child.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, I think, first and foremost important to just get away from some of the hyper emotional and polarizing language that has been thrown out there. And, secondly, to make the point here that yes, of course, it's valuable to be able to grieve the loss of a family member, to be able to have funeral rites and the burial. Yes, that's true. But look, the situation isn't over yet. We have another family member
Yeah.
who's there, who the granddaughter, sorry, the grandson. This was a little boy
Mm-hmm.
named Chance. They've named him Chance. So give Chance a chance,
Yes.
as they've been saying. um, that he is still part of the situation, and
Yeah.
there hasn't been a final resolution to this case yet. So the question becomes ethically, what are the lines of moral obligation here that we have on behalf of the single remaining patient in this case? And the hospital has, I think, reasonably deemed that they do need to do their best. And I think the other angle here is that a mom, by the fact that she had gotten pregnant and she was taking care of her child
Mm-hmm.
in the earlier part of her pregnancy before she had the blood clots, that's already an indication that she was willing to take steps on behalf of her child.
Mm-hmm.
She wanted to see the child do well and reach the light of day. And so it's reasonable to think that a mom, even in this dire set of circumstances where she has died, that she'd be willing to donate her body in this way. And, I say to people, look, when we die, we can do a lot of things with our bodies. We can donate them to science, for example. And some people will do that. They'll choose to donate it to science. And I'll say, when you donate your body to science, you don't really know exactly how they're going to use it.
That's right.
They may use it for some rather unseemly and surprising things
Mm-hmm.
like ballistics research, where they're
Yeah.
going to riddle your body with bullet holes, maybe trying to develop better Kevlar protection for policemen.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a pretty kind of unusual, unexpected maybe outcome of donating your body to science. But as long as people understand that that's what they're doing, and as long as they've gotten consent, for example, from their husband or their children, so that the family knows they want to donate their body to science, that's fine. And so, going right back to this case of Adriana Smith, I think it's very reasonable to suppose that she, as a mom, would have wanted to do this, would have wanted to see the care of her baby continue in a situation where she herself is not directly alive and able to contribute, but only indirectly through the remaining functions of her body that are being, actively and artificially supported by the interventions of the hospital.
Yeah. One of the things I know that the I read somewhere, and I only read it one place. I haven't looked at any other places. That the hospital really hasn't said why, the specific reason. They have not claimed it's because of the heartbeat bill. There's speculation that it's actually because of laws around life decisions and the interests of the state, is the way I understand it. Do you know if do they know anything about that? Like, is that why
Yes.
they're doing it?
Yes, there is an advance directive
Mm-hmm.
law in Georgia,
Yeah.
and it basically indicates that if a woman is in a state of pregnancy, that she should not be unplugged without, due accommodation for the medical situation surrounding the child.
Right.
So that's part, it's not actually the heartbeat bill, you're
Yeah.
correct, but it is this other thing that was passed, I think maybe as far back as 1996, if I
Yeah.
recall. Don't quote me on that, but
Yeah.
it was a while ago that Georgia passed their advanced directive law, which would apply to this case more directly.
Yeah, and that's like many, many states have those types of laws. So this is not unique to them by any
That's
means.
right. That's
So,
right. And I think here the question, I want to just maybe add a little twist to
yeah.
what I've developed, what I've tried to share with you up to this moment, because I think saying that the mom would want to do this, I mean, it may seem like a strong premise, but when a woman is pregnant, she'll oftentimes take steps, for example, to be careful about what she eats.
Mm-hmm.
She'll be careful to avoid alcohol because there's, fetal alcohol syndrome, which can cause birth defects. And, even to use a more extreme example, if you had a mother who was holding, let's say, her newborn baby in her arms, and she noticed, a few feet away, there was a guy who pulled out a handgun and pointed it at her and her baby. I think it would be a natural instinct on the part of the mom to turn her back
Right.
towards them and protect her baby and take the bullet
Mm-hmm.
in the back for her baby.
Yes.
So, to think that it's somehow here, as some people have even gone so far as to say, oh, it's an abuse of a corpse to, keep this pregnancy going. No, it's just an extension of the fact that this woman who has died is still miraculously a mom. And she has a child who is hers, who deserves care and continuing love in the only way that she can provide that ongoing outreach on behalf of her child's well-being.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think you've done a really good job of kind of telling us, answering some of those ethical questions. Um, how does church teaching kind of play into this? Because the church doesn't have a specific teaching. Hey, if this happens, if A and B happen, then C has to happen too. So, what church teachings play into this type of situation?
Yeah, so I think I've gotten the question on this case already a few times. What about ordinary and extraordinary means?
Yeah.
People will say, well, the mom, she's hooked up to all these machines. She has gotten the worst diagnosis you can
Mm-hmm.
imagine, which
Mm-hmm.
is that she's died. And so, isn't this clearly extraordinary means? And therefore, the church, in her teachings around uh, ordinary and extraordinary means, would say you could unplug her. Well, it's not so simple. You have
Mm-hmm.
to be very precise in how you apply this here. And what the church reminds us is the distinction of ordinary and extraordinary applies to individuals who are living and
Right.
who may have a disease or a sickness. She
Mm-hmm.
is no longer living. She already died. Her body is being held in a kind of stasis by a bit of brute force
Yeah.
through the medical profession. But she died, so you can't, because why can't you apply it? Because how do you actually do ordinary and extraordinary means? You ask the question, what are the benefits
Mm-hmm.
and how do they compare to all the burdens? Now, can a corpse suffer burdens itself?
Right.
No,
No.
it can't. It's already deceased. He or
Right.
she is already deceased. In this case, the mom is deceased.
Right.
So no burdens. Are there benefits? to doing this for the mom, well, again, we have to say no. There's no benefits to mom. You're oxygenating some cells, but she is no longer alive. So the whole category of benefits and burdens does not work for the mother.
Right.
So you have to immediately go kind of sideways here, laterally, and say, well, how about on behalf of the child?
Mm.
Are there undue burdens by keeping this situation going? And I would say, look, there may be some burdens because the fact that the mom is not in perfect health does mean that her body may start to show some challenging signs of decomposition because she's died.
Mm-hmm.
It may be hard to keep this pregnancy going. There may be a little bit of stress
Yeah.
for the baby in utero because of this fact, because of this unusual situation. But those are relatively minor, I would say, especially when you add them up against, hey, what are the benefits? The benefits are this baby may possibly be able to be shuttled all the way to 23 weeks or further. They're actually aiming for 30 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
23 weeks is viability. They want to get it to 30. They want to get chance to 30. So he has the best chance once he's born to thrive and do well.
Yeah.
So that's a huge benefit.
Yes.
And you, by using the benefit burden analysis and by doing ordinary extraordinary, I would say we have a duty to continue to care for Chance, even in these very unusual circumstances that he finds himself in.
Yeah. How far along is he now? Do you know?
I don't know that figure off the top of my
Okay.
head. That's a very good question. I'm
Yeah.
not certain.
I
I
don't
think he's
remember either.
past 19 weeks, but
Okay.
I'm not certain.
So he's getting probably close to viability, and I mean, hopefully we can get him at least there. Um,
Exactly. Boy, I think it would be a wonderful thing. And Renee, think about it from another point of view. Let's suppose that baby Chance makes it
yeah.
past the threshold of viability. I mean, these pregnancies are really dicey and tricky.
Yeah.
The doctors have to work super hard to keep the corpse, doing these things. And many times when they try, they fail. They don't get to viability.
Right.
But imagine that it worked out and Chance was born, grows up, and then he says to people, look what my mom did, how generous it was of her to, have not only conceived me and carried me early in the pregnancy, but to have carried me all the way through to the end. And this will be, a kind of powerful pro-life
Yeah.
testimony. And I think the people on the other side who are pro-abortion don't want people like this out there
Very
giving
true.
firsthand experience, of why abortion is a bad thing, why we shouldn't be, opting out of life when things are a little more challenging. He will be a living testimony and a voice for reason, a voice for sanity, and a voice that's pro-life.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that point. That's a fantastic point because the pro-abortion side has been very vocal on this against the heartbeat law, and you're right. They are not going to want someone with that kind of testimony, even though these are very rare situations out there. So, okay, we have about 4 minutes ish, Father. Is there? I'd love to talk a little bit about the brain death issue. Do we have time for that, or is there something else that we really need to say about the pregnancy itself?
I think we have time.
Okay, so I know that maybe in this case there might actually be brain death, and that's all good. But that's a little bit of a gray area. Am I right on this, or
Well,
can it be?
yeah.
He's gonna say
Sorry.
no.
Yeah, I've got a phone ringing in the background. Let
Oh,
me
that's
just
okay.
see if it can finish, and then hopefully you
Sure,
can cut out this.
sure. Yes, no problem.
Okay. Oh, there it goes. Okay. Sorry about
No
that. Yes.
problem.
So, yeah. So, is it a gray area? I would say there are certainly some concerns around brain death, and let me just, try to sum up some of them.
Yeah,
There always are concerns as to whether appropriate and careful testing has or has not been done
yeah,
on individuals who are declared brain dead. It's possible to cut corners. I've actually heard of cases where this sometimes happens. And, Renee, I think this is a consequence of the fact that we are not in a completely pro-life society. We already have
hmm
people who devalue human life, and sometimes given an opportunity to cut those corners, for their own set of, skewed values. They will do that, and not even physicians once in a while. Now, I think it's still relatively rare. And so those who are thinking about donating their organs after they die, I would say, they have to make a personal discernment and decision around that. But the medical profession does have a very strict set of guidelines that are required in terms of that testing.
Yeah.
Now, recently, there has been a little bit of controversy that has arisen because there is one part of the brain, the hypothalamus, which is a lower part of your brain, that in some more rare cases may still function in
Oh,
individuals who have been declared brain dead. And so there's, controversy around that. We at the Bioethics Center are pushing, very actively to encourage the medical field to sort of adjust the parameters of testing so that brain death testing will include looking at hypothalamic function and making sure that that also has stopped so that you have moral certainty
yeah.
that the individual has actually died. And once those types of tests have been properly done, then indeed it's very possible and reasonable to donate one's organs. And the church says that this is an act of generosity. If people, would like to do that, they're free to do it.
Right. And you want to be sure in your own head that the hospital is not just like, well, she's pretty close to brain death, and we really need that heart. So,
Right,
you want
right.
you want to make sure that's not happening.
And I think in that sense, working with a healthcare team that you know
Hmm.
your team, et cetera, then you've established trust. I mean, what you're touching on is basically a matter of trust,
Yeah.
and trust touches the entire field of healthcare. And
Yeah.
when you go to your doctor, when you get a surgeon, you're always putting yourself under the knife, but with under an aspect or a heading of trust. And so that question of making sure that you do trust those who you've turned to for good health care, that's really a key part of
Yeah.
making good decisions. And I think a lot of medical professionals are very trustworthy,
Yeah.
and we just have to ourselves be part of the equation, not be too passive
Yeah.
in the face of all of
Yeah.
that.
For sure. Okay, Father Tad, we are, as you said, it always goes fast. We are out of time. So thank you so much for talking to us about this particular case so we can kind of apply it to maybe future things that happen and really understand the ethics of it. As I said, we will have you come back and talk more about kind of end of life directives, which I think is going to apply more to all of us. And we all need it at some point, so we better know, right?
Absolutely. So important to get those end of life discussions going with your
Yes.
family. And so I'll look forward to doing that show with you. That
Yeah,
should be really
it will be
great.
good. Yeah. Thank you so much for being here with us again. I appreciate
Really
it.
my pleasure. Thanks for having me on
Yeah,
again.
you bet. All right. Of course, you can always find us on the internet at sfcatholic.org for anything you want to find out about the diocese. And I hope you'll join us when we have Father Tad back for the other conversation. That's it for us today. Hope you'll join us again next week for more Catholic Views.